Hey guys, welcome to another video. For today's video, we are going to be doing a PC build. Components for the build: ASUS Prime, a B550 Plus, pretty decent motherboard. I picked it up for 1,189 Rand. Came with free delivery. I did do a video about this board. Then paired with the board, we're going to go for a Ryzen 5 Pro 4650G. I picked this up a little while back. It came in a PC that I bought and haven't used it since, so we are going to put it to the test. For the SSD, we've gone for an M.2 SSD. You can pick these up at EveTech clearance sale. This one itself is so for the clearance sale, I think it's either a clearance sale or winter sale. This one is a 512 gig. So when it comes to SSDs and hard drive, putting an SSD in like 120 gig or a 256 gig SSD, those things usually cost 120. You're looking at, cheapest I've seen is 330 Rand. And then for the 256, you're probably looking at about 500. This is 699 from EveTech. That's excluding delivery and new. And it's an NVMe drive, SSD M.2. So pretty good deal. When you pair a 120 gig SSD and a say 2 terabyte hard drive, it tends to work out more expensive than this. So it tends to work out cheaper, trying to bring down the cost of the build. I'm probably not going to put a GPU with this build because we've got the Ryzen 5 Pro 4650G. So we'll run it like that, and then this is the type of build that if you buy something like this, you can add the GPU that you want at a later stage, and it'll give you something to play on. So lower end games, so something like esports titles. For the RAM, picked up a second-hand kit of DDR4 2x8 gig Vengeance LPX memory. This is a 3000 megahertz kit, so it's not the craziest, it's not 3600 or 4000 megahertz kit, pretty standard. And then for the cooler, we're going slightly old school for the cooler, RGB. I mean, these used to come with the 2700s. I think it was 2700s that came out with these things. So we're going to be pairing it with this CPU cooler. So yeah, for today's build, we're going to be putting it into a Antec P120 crystal case. And then for the fans, we are going Coolmon fans. I managed to pick up these for a pretty good price. They're not the greatest fan kit that you can get, but it does bring down the cost, and they are fans, so it will cool down your system. I would, with these type of things, I would maybe at a later stage recommend changing out the fans. Usually what I do is, if one of the fans goes, because basically I paid 700 Rand and I got 100 Rand a fan. RGB remote, the works, Molex power. You've got a remote, so I think that helps a little bit. Rainbow RGB fan. Cool. So yeah, so we'll be pairing it with that. Again, I would recommend changing this out when you get a chance. Usually if one of the fans goes, or one of the fans RGBs goes, then slowly but surely start changing out fans, so you can do it at a later stage. This will just give us airflow and a specific look to the case. So yeah, that's what we're going to be looking at there. I'll take you through the fans in a little bit. Yeah, so let's start building. So for the motherboard, ASUS Prime B550. This thing has really surprised me. Quite a decent motherboard. I am very impressed. We're not going to be using that. We can take out the IO shield and we can take out the M.2 screws. It has got two M.2 slots, one at the top and one at the bottom. We're only going to be using the one at the top. I'm only putting one in, but it's definitely a fairly decent board for upgrading. And yeah, it's not a X570, but for a budget price, it's really not bad. Basically, you compare this with it's just a standard Ryzen 5 5500. You can pick up one of those for 2,500 Rand at the moment. So, I mean, that paired with a motherboard like this, and you're pretty much good to go. And would be a pretty decent combination. So, everything is good to go. The Ryzen Pro. So this performs pretty similar to a 3600. Just with integrated graphics. It's not as good. Here we go. CPU in. We're gonna go with some thermal paste nano material from. I've been testing some thermal paste lately, so we are going to be testing this. Okay, for the RAM, Vengeance LPX RAM, so not RGB. Picked up the RAM kit, 1,000 Rand. So second hand, 1,000 Rand, not too bad. Usually I try and budget 1,000 Rand for RAM kits. Pretty new, pretty nice kit. Okay, so we're gonna go for 95. The bottom does not open. It is normal for some of the motherboards. So obviously the RGB is going to cost you a little bit more. Paying almost 1,200 Rand for the motherboard. CPU, I picked it up for pretty cheap, but to buy it new, you're looking at 4,000 Rand. The RAM kit, $1,000. So call it 1,000, 2,000 plus 2,000 for the CPU. We've got about a 4,000 Rand setup here, and you can switch between CPUs. You can go for the 5500, which is a 2,500 Rand, and put that in. That's a very good option, spending a little bit extra money. But 4,000 Rand, 4,500 Rand, 5,000 Rand is basically where you want to be for this type of cheap budget build. For the M.2, we're going with Hikvision. This is a Hikvision NVMe M.2. For the price, it's very good. And if you're looking to upgrade and you've got the ability to take M.2, then I mean, this is a good cheap option. It's fairly basic, fairly bare bones. And I mean, if you look at upgrading, you can slot it in there and then upgrade to the next one as you go. Just want to see, this is a 228 millimeter, so 228. Put that one in, which is a standard length. You do get the smaller ones for laptops, but then again, nowadays everyone's trying to stick to the standard, it seems. We're just gonna finger tighten it and then clip it in. So that's our M.2 plus a screw. And give it a little bit of a tight. Don't tighten it too tight. You end up breaking all these standoffs and stuff. Okay, so there we go. Last thing we need to do is put on the CPU cooler. You're just going to put a pea-sized dash of thermal paste. and our CPU cooler. Okay, so this is one of the old schools running on high, old school CPU coolers. We'll give it a good clean. Comes with RGB cable, so you do get an RGB cable that comes with it. It is the 4-pin. There we go, it's the 4-pin. And we have got quite a few 4-pin headers here. So here on top we've got a 4-pin header, so we can just plug it straight into there. So I'm going to add it in. If it is even for this thing. There we go. And then it also comes with a USB. So this will plug into your USB. So we'll plug that in as well. And that is a 3-pin. 3-pin into there, 4-pin into the top, and then that's pretty much it. I always did like these coolers. They are pretty straightforward, and then we just compress the plug. And then for the top, got a little bit of a knot in it just to shorten it slightly. And then this is going to plug into the top. We're not going to go for, it's got CPU fan and then CPU OPT. I think we're going to opt for CPU fan. Usually it's best to check the manual. But we're going to opt for CPU fan, and CPU fan is first. It could be for AIO, they do have sections for AIO. Okay, so that's it. We can undo this one. And then see if we can find a nice way to route these cables. So we've got USB 2, which is that one, and nothing on top. And that's not a USB header. It's only got 2 USB headers. Oh, interesting. So basically, usually what I do is run it up through the top and then down the other side. There's no point running it now because we still need to put it into the case. But you can also run it this way. Maybe you should just run it that way. Just try and keep it out of the way. And then we'll see if we need to tie these things up at some point. Sometimes you can actually slip them under the heat sinks, which I don't think will be possible here, but I mean, it's not too bad. And then this one would be the same. Keep these cables together, keep them out of the way, nice and neat. 1 and 2. And 1 and 2. So we'll see how that looks once it's in the case, and then we can decide from there how we want to. Oh, there we go. You can run it straight underneath the, push it back a little bit just so that it doesn't pull too tight, and we can push it kind of in behind. Yeah. Get it in here without anything. One's in place, and 2, and they're crossing. I don't like the crossing. Probably just gonna have to cable tie them in place, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so paired with this board, the CPU does use a fair amount of power. Does need a fair amount of power, not actually too much. I think the TDP on this CPU is 65 watts. I'll put the specs up on the screen. We are going to be installing something a little bit different, a little bit higher end power supply. So this is the Corsair CV450. It is a bronze plus rated power supply. So pretty decent power supply. Give you the wattage that you need. And capable of quite a bit actually. I think without too much problems you can probably push up to a 3060 Ti on it. I'd go 3060 for sure, but 3060 Ti would probably be reaching the limit. The CPU itself, max power draw is 85 watts, probably less than 85 watts. A GPU, if you had to put a GPU into the system, depending on what GPU you go for. I'm running a RTX 3070, and I mean this at max power draw only pulls, I think it's 230 watts, and that's even with a slight overclock. So I mean, in terms of this, you would need 80 watts for the motherboard. I think it was 65 watts for the CPU. So 80 watts for the motherboard, 65 watts for the CPU, and then your graphics card, depending on what you go for, anything up to 180 watts. Should be fine to run on this power supply. I will be testing it to see how far we can push it. In terms of the cables, you've got one ATX 24 pin, you've got one EPS 8 pin, so it's 4+4, so it's perfectly suited for this board. It's got the 8 pin on top for the EPS. PCIe, which is for your graphics card, it's got 8 pin plus 2. One 8 pin plus 2. So 6 pin plus 2, it's got 2 of them, and then one SATA chain and one 2-bar. So pretty solid little power supply. In terms of the actual, there we go, rated on the back, we've got on the 12 volt rail 432 watts on the 12 volt rail alone, and then added up you've got 110 on the 3.3 and 5 volt, minus 12 you've got 3.6 watts, and then 5 volt plus 5 volt, you've got 15 watts. So they put it up to 450 watts, and it is 80 plus bronze. So for the system, for our case where we will be installing all of this, we are looking at is the Antec P120 Crystal. Okay, so it's got a glass front panel, glass side panel, fans can go there, it's got space for your power supply, motherboard, quite a bit of space for your motherboard. This stuff can actually go through to the back since we don't need it right now. Pretty decent case. It will be interesting to build in it. We can remove it's got a dust cover in the bottom. Quite a nice one. Not very fine, but it'll do what it needs to do. Also magnetic, and it's got the magnetic feet on it, which is quite nice. And yeah, also got a GPU bracket. Okay, so for motherboard, let's have a look. We can go IO shield, we can put that in the back. Okay, for the power supply, we can probably put that in too. Power supply comes with a power supply bracket, so you don't have to squeeze it in. I mean, it helps for convenience. We did get power supply screws, so we can install the rear bracket. Obviously, it's a non-modular power supply. It is semi-sleeved, so the stuff that does come through has got sleeving on it. So your EPX, your power for your CPU, these are all sleeved, so these are all the ones that will come through, and then the other ones are the ones that stay in the back, usually for Molex and transfer connections. Now we're going to see if it's going to actually take up that space. You can feed all of that through. So yeah, pretty much not entirely a budget build. I mean, this added GPU, 3 grand, 4 grand. So it's not entirely budget. Well, it's budget since we're not putting a graphics card in it.
Hey guys, thanks very much for watching. Stay tuned for the for part 2, for completion of build, where we put all the components in and tend to run into a problem. So stay tuned for that. That will be coming up next. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next video.